Hello, friends. I'm Jerome Stevenson.
Hello, community. I am Jennifer Stevenson.
And welcome back to D20 The Curtain, Behind the Curtain, where Oklahoma theater geeks hit record and talk about their new addiction to Dungeons and Dragons. How you doing, Jennifer?
I am pretty good, all things quarantined.
It's just you and me today. We got no Zoom, no rest of the party, so we can be completely pantsless.
That's it. It's a pantsless day.
It's a pantsless Thursday.
But I would like to make a point.
Yes?
I don't know if we can call it a new addiction anymore. We have way too many books.
That's probably fair. But in defense, it's easy to get addicted to buying stuff. I mean, we go to the game store and then it's there.
And then you have a bucket full of dice.
That is for sure.
And hey, this is, just briefly, shout out to our local gaming store.
Yes, Game HQ. We love that place.
We sure do.
We love that place. I am excited about today's episode because we're getting to do something kind of fun. We're going to have sort of a primer, an introduction, if you will, D&D 101 for those folks who have never played the game before. And we hope to have something that both our novice players and our enthusiasts will really get use out of. Wouldn't you agree?
I do indeed. We're going to, for the new players, we're just going to kind of break down the basic rules a little bit into something that's just simple and direct instead of blah, blah, blah.
And then for those of you who already love this hobby of ours, we'll be sharing some thoughts about ways to introduce new players and maybe even a few reluctant players to trying this game. So I think that's kind of the goal here today, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. So before we get started, we have a couple of announcements. First of all, thank you to the Pollard Theater Company in Guthrie, Oklahoma, for their support of the D20 The Curtain podcast. The Pollard Theater Company, experience inspiration.
We want to say thank you to composer extraordinaire Kevin MacLeod for allowing us and so many others access to his original compositions. Please check out his expansive music library at incompetech.com. We also want to thank our friend, the amazing Ms. Louise Goldberg, who created the main theme for our characters in the campaign. Man, we just can't thank her enough for the use of her music, her generosity, and her time.
That is 100%. I'm 100% for that. Louise Goldberg, Sweet
We
Lou,
love
as I like to
you.
call her. Yes.
We just want to take a minute and shout out the people in our community that have left us a review. It's really flattering. We love it. Hey, I love my slots. Thanks so much for your review. We appreciate it.
All levels of love to the one and only Queen McBee. Thank you so much for your wonderful rating and review.
CMDC 2020. Thanks a lot for listening and reviewing.
A giant thank you and a big check it out to my man Gov Mule. Okay, thank you so much, brother. We appreciate your support.
Hey, thanks, Bird is Nerd. My white deck, your red deck. Anytime. Thanks for listening.
If you like the show, please support us by subscribing to D20 The Curtain on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple users, please consider hooking us up with a coveted 5-star rating and leave us a few encouraging words in a positive review. It just takes a few moments, but it'll have a lasting impact on the show. Announcements out of the way, let's jump right in. The first question we're often asked, or you hear from so many people, is what is D&D? What is Dungeons and Dragons? Well, the stock answer, thank you Wikipedia, is that Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game, typically set in the world of swords and sorcery, originally designed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and introduced to the public in '74. Now, that may not actually give you a clear picture of what the game is. So here's the answer from us, or at least from me, and then let me know what you think, Jennifer. I think the answer is that Dungeons & Dragons is an experience in which typically you and a group of friends create a story by playing a game of structured make-believe. In this game, the winning condition is to simply have fun and collaborate with the rest of the players to create this living story. That's it. That's my take on it. Yours? What do you think?
Absolutely. And, it doesn't just have to be sword and sorcery. That's my preferred version, but you can play it in space. You can play it in modern day. You can play it in whatever setting you like, but it's all about creating a team. You can be heroes, you can be villains. You are out there making a story together. You roll some dice. That's it. Right. It's that simple at the end of the day.
And I guess that's true. I guess people play different story types, but they use the D&D system because it's essentially the gaming system is what makes it Dungeons and Dragons, right?
That's right. It kind of provides the structure system, but you can put whatever window dressing you want on it.
Right. Okay.
Dragons in space.
So, just out of curiosity, have you played, and I know you hadn't got a chance to play much in our early married life, but had you played the Dungeons and Dragons system? You played other versions of this system.
I had, yes. I actually started with second edition way back in a long time ago.
Right.
And I played initially in the kind of sword and sorcery world, but I also played one in a world called Dark Sun that is this really dark, creepy, no water world, and everything is harsh and kind of Mad Maxian. There's so many cool worlds that you can play in. I'm a Tolkien girl.
Right.
I like my elves. I like my magic, but there's all kinds of great ways to play.
For sure. Even we've kind of taken stories from obviously other genres. I know that I've stolen directly from Firefly. Sorry, Joss. You, when you get a fanship like that, we're gonna take stuff from you, bro. All Buffy love. Buffy, Angel, Firefly, Dollhouse.
Mm-hmm. Joss, he writes them quips.
Obviously, there's lots of reasons why people play the game, but what are your thoughts as to why so many people don't try D&D?
Well, for me, I was immediately smitten. The first thing I looked at was a Dragonlance source book, and then the next thing I pulled out of a comic book box at the foot of my friend Aaron's bed was a book with all the weapons in it, and they were labeled, and I want to swing one of these. How do we do that? But we tried to talk some of our friends into it, and they're looking at these books upon books upon books, and they think to themselves, I don't want to study. It was the summer. Mm-hmm. We want to ride around in cars, and this is not necessarily what we're after. No more studying, please. And that was kind of the put off this seems like a lot of extraneous work for air quotes fun.
I think in addition to that, it's too silly. It's such a silly waste of time. Why would I get into playing make-believe? So it's also that. And then I guess, something that we kind of discovered and I talked to you about, this concept of gatekeepers.
I'm really lucky in my nerd life, from the comic shop, buying Magic the Gathering cards, playing D&D. I never met some crusty person telling me that I wasn't accepted at their table, not once. Right. And I don't think that's necessarily everyone's experience. It's just that I've been lucky in my experience as a woman in the gaming community and the nerd community. I haven't ever really experienced that, but I do know it's out there. I have plenty of friends who have experienced it. I've just been lucky enough to not be one of those.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
See, I had to look it up. I heard somebody talking about it in one of the resource videos I was watching on YouTube. And it occurred to me, I was like, I don't know what a gatekeeper is in this instance. And then heard them describing it, and I thought that has not been my experience at all either, because when I first started looking into the game, I remember going to, again, a plug for our friends at Game HQ, going to the store and having a ton of questions, and they took so much time with me. And then other people in the stores, other patrons of the store were like, oh, you're looking for this book. You really ought to try this. And so they were so generous with their time. It instantly dispelled any notion of kind of those stereotypical images of what D&D players were. Mm-hmm. And it said, come on in, brother. Let us show you why we love it. And then I thought, when I left that store, one, I thought I've got a lot of stuff to read in the next couple of months. And two, I thought, well, I'll definitely be going back there because that place was super inviting. I really want to get into this idea that it's silly. That's one of the things that I really want to combat, because storytelling is a basic human need. It's how we keep a society surviving and thriving. As a person who's been invested in theater for 20 plus years, I can tell you for a fact this art form that has always been on the cusp of extinction has not gone anywhere, largely because we need that fellowship. We need to keep telling stories. And we're at our best when we're being creative.
I think so. I don't think that everybody feels that pull to do it, but sure. I think everybody reaps the benefits of those that do. And, people said that D&D was dead. People said the poetry was dead. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of art forms that have teetered on the brink of extinction and then reemerge and thrive and do wonderfully. But yeah, I think everybody benefits from those who are driven to create. Absolutely.
Well, and I think it's a misconception that it's only you make music so you're creative. You make plays or you act or you direct so you're creative. Well, Chefs are creative. Bankers are creative. I've watched it firsthand because you're trying to help people build an establishment in their life, and you've got paperwork and bureaucracy that you have to deal with, and all of that requires a hand that goes, okay, here's the narrative that we craft to see if we can help you make your dream home a reality, to see if you can't help you build your business. So we're constantly underestimating the power of creativity in our lives, particularly those of us who think, oh no, I'm not creative because I'm just doing this. No, it's all a form of creativity. And when you're sitting talking about Dungeons and Dragons, it absolutely frees you up and opens you up to do whatever in this structured setting. And that just seems like something that I would be like, go for it.
I also, when we talk about the daydreaming part of it, I don't think that there's anybody listening to us talk right now who didn't have that experience as a kid, staring out a window and watching the wind in the leaves in a tree and imagined themselves swinging through it. I mean, all of us had that, and all of us had the smack on the back of the head that said, get back to your work, get back to the task at hand. And I think that daydreaming and imagining things are slowly kind of ground out of us, and Dungeons and Dragons is an absolutely excellent way to reawaken the daydreamer in you. We all have one of those.
Even just creating an elaborate exercise of storytelling for your kids in bedtime stories. I think there is nothing cooler than giving your kids permission at an early age to say, that's a muscle that you can engage. Your imagination, your ability to think beyond what is laid out right in front of you is really valuable to you. Never let that go. You could turn into the next fill in the blank here.
Oh, sure. Instead of smothering the spark, throwing a little gasoline on it.
Absolutely.
Encourage that fire that kiddos have.
Which brings us to the next question. How do you do it? How do you play Dungeons and Dragons? That was the biggest obstacle to me. I had heard about it. I knew what it was, but I knew you had to have a ton of books. You had to have all of these dice, which I had never even seen before. It just seemed like an overwhelming amount of learning. So let's dig into the basic principles of Dungeons and Dragons.
Through first edition, second edition, 3.5, all of the core rules have essentially remained the same. So the saltiest grognard who started with first edition in 1981
Grognard, you lost me right there. I was like, what does that mean?
That just means an old-time, crusty D&D player. So those rules haven't changed any. They stay the same, and they guide the game, and it is simplified, I find, with 5e. It's made much easier, in my opinion, for new players. It's much more welcoming. It begins with the DM or dungeon master describing the environment for the players. That's step one. Step two is the players describe their desired action. They tell the dungeon master what they want to do in that environment. And step three is the dungeon master narrates the results of what the players choose to do.
So let's break those down a little bit, shall we?
That sounds great.
With number one, the Dungeon Master describes the environment. One of the players in your game will be designated the Dungeon Master, or DM if they prefer. The DM tells the players where the adventurers are, what's around them, what they're encountering. It presents the basic scope of options that are present, how many doors lead out of the room, what's on the table, who's in the tavern, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. They describe the world around these players.
The next step, the players describe their desired action. That's when the players engage with the DM's environment that they've created. So, sometimes one person will speak up and say, we'd like to take the door on the east side of the room. Sometimes players will take different actions and do different things in the environment. And the DM will listen to each one of those players and then decide how to resolve each one of those actions.
Once that decision is made, then the DM narrates the results of their action. Describing the results often leads to another decision point, which brings the flow of the game right back to step one. This pattern holds whether the adventurers are cautiously exploring a ruin, or talking to a devious prince, or locked into mortal combat against a dragon. In a nutshell, that's it. Those are the essentials of the game. Are there more elements to it? Sure. But with these three fundamental components, you're ready to play. You are ready to engage in a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and it can be as simple as this or as complicated as you want it beyond that.
That's exactly right. And the Dungeon Master is there to help guide you. New players, should you have any questions, should you have any concerns, the DM is going to take your hand and guide you through that scene. Your fellow players are going to back you up, and that's how it works. It's really that simple.
And depending on your table, they're going to give you all the leeway in the world, because remember, most of these people want you to play. They want you to fall in love just like they have.
The more friends that play, the more games are going, and the better chance you have of playing once a week. There's that just me.
So, some of you are probably thinking this. What about these dice? I've seen dice at the table. I know there are dice at the table. Most of those dice are weird shapes that I've never seen. So what about the dice? Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. There are often dice at the table, but don't panic. The dice are actually much simpler than they appear. Jennifer?
So the game uses polyhedral dice with different numbers of sides. In these rules, the different dice are referred to by the letter D for die, followed by the number of sides. So D4, D6, D8, and so on. Right. In Dungeons and Dragons, by and large, you're going to use a D20 for most everything. A D20 is, shockingly, a dice with 20 sides.
Right.
A 20 is the highest, 1 is the lowest, and that's going to be the thing that you roll more often than not.
So, during the course of your exchange with the Dungeon Master, you may find yourself wanting to do something that has an opportunity for failure. When this opportunity arises, the Dungeon Master will often ask you to provide a roll. This way, we introduce an element of chance into the game. The die roll, plus any bonuses you get for skills that your character has, determine the level of the roll. And that roll is matched against something we call a DC, a difficulty class. Your roll versus that DC determine whether or not you're successful at the action, whether or not you're just barely successful, or whether you more than exceed the expectation. That provides an opportunity for the story to change, for new elements to be introduced into the story, whether it be a success, a failure.
Some of you out there who aren't all that familiar with the game may still have heard the term a natural 20, because gamers will shout that so loud you might hear it in the neighbor house. I mean, in the neighbor's house. So a D20 is the highest success that you can make. It is in combat the smashiest. It is in skill checks the bestiest. It's the one you want to see. You might also hear a natural 1, which means an automatic fail. And sometimes really sad things happen.
And before we get tons of emails, we know, the D20, the natural 20, only really has an effect in a combat roll scenario. However, and I bet a lot of Dungeon Masters will agree with this, it's just as fun to use it in a check as it is in a piece of combat. So no, it's not a rule. However, it's a commonly accepted practice that a 20 is a super special success and a 1 is a failure that you'll have to write a song about.
House rules, baby.
So the simplest answer about the dice is this. Yes, they're there. Yes, you'll be asked to roll them. But at most, you'll be asked to do some basic addition, some basic subtraction, and you'll be able to recognize the die suggested because it's the top number on the die that is mentioned in the title. A D20, D12, whatever. So other than that, it's really not that frightening. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and really, as long as after those forehead slaps in elementary school when you were daydreaming out the window, as long as you paid a little bit of attention in math class, you'll be able to do this. I promise.
So that brings us to what I like to call the basic pillars of the game. You have the core rules, but I think that these elements are the basic pillars of the game. 1, exploration. A third of every game is going to be taking note of and looking into the world around you. For instance, the Dungeon Master may say something along the lines of, in the downstairs study of the king's manor, you find a wall covered in deep mahogany bookshelves flanking a tall ironclad fireplace in which a fire crackles and pops, providing a dry heat throughout the otherwise cold, dank room. A heavy redwood desk sits atop a large ornate rug that covers half of the wooden floor as the fire's flickering amber light dances on the room's many drawers, cabinets, and walls. What would you like to do?
So the next step in exploration is the player getting involved in the DM's room. But see, there's something that the DM does in the exploration phase. Not only does he set the mood and the tone for you, he's also giving you hints and clues. There are things in this room that you might want to pay attention to. So, maybe you have a lovelorn bard and he's just going to go stare longingly into the fireplace. The rogue might pay attention to those drawers and cabinets. Maybe he wants to take a quick check. Every player can engage in the room as they so wish.
And it's important to remember, because you're playing this collaboratively, you want to give everyone an opportunity to experience this storytelling, to add their voice, to add their character's voice to what's happening in the story. That's what makes it belong to you all and not to one player exclusively.
One of the key elements of the exploration piece is, as a character, don't be afraid to ask questions. DM is their wallpaper. You know, does the fire look like it was made by hand or by magic? All of those things the DM has laid out as clues for you to investigate and participate in. There's the time spent in creating the story, so now it's your time to get involved.
The more you invest in the story elements that the Dungeon Master is presenting, one, the more it's paying off, because I assure you, she or he has spent a lot of time building this backstory and putting it into his notes. So the fact that you took notice of that really pays off with them. Two, it also helps you to further immerse yourself in the world and your character in what is happening in this world around you. And that makes for a much richer game experience. It will draw you back to the story and to the world time and time again, because it feels like a place that you can escape to. And that is what makes the game such a joy to play.
The next pillar is combat, and combat is the part of Dungeons and Dragons where you fight bad guys and you fight monsters, and you and your adventuring group will roll initiative and determine in this spot who gets to go first and swing their sword at that space dragon.
Space dragon, yes. The dreaded space dragon. Typically, your dungeon master will ask you what you'd like to do, and at some point, and it doesn't have to be immediately prior to combat, he will ask you to roll what is called initiative. Again, you'll pick up your trusted D20, give it a roll. You should have on your character sheet a number called the initiative bonus. Those two numbers combined tell you your place in the fighting order. Simple as that. Now you're off and running against the world's most dangerous foes.
The space dragon.
Yeah, the space dragon. Yeah, of course.
So combat in Dungeons and Dragons is where most of the rules are. This is where you're going to have to understand what the dice do a little bit. And of course, once again, your DM's there to help guide you, but this is where you need to know what kind of damage your weapon does. Do you want to throw a fireball at the space dragon? All of these things are pretty structured in combat, where outside of combat, you can be pretty loose with the rules. But combat, everybody takes their turn. They have a certain set of things they can do within that turn. So that's where most of the rules in Dungeons and Dragons are the firmest, I would say.
Sure. And Wizards of the Coast, side note, yeah, get on that space dragon thing, because we think we got something there. We think there's gold in the space dragon. But it's also fair to remember this. Sometimes you won't have the firmest grasp on all that your character can do. That's okay too. Again, we've talked about this. The Dungeon Master's there to help. You tell the Dungeon Master, I want to hit that guy with my sword. Fair enough. The Dungeon Master's going to ask you for the roll. If it is a successful hit, boom. Then he'll prepare to give you information about what creates the damage. You'll have another series of dice that you'll have to roll. Ultimately, the chance needs to lay in your hands. But it's okay, particularly early on, to get a primer course on your feet with other players. Again, remember, these folks are probably just as engaged in watching you fall in love with the hobby as they are playing the game itself.
And another thing about combat that kind of goes back to the exploration piece, you don't just have to do the prescribed swinging of a sword or throwing a spell. You can slide across the bar top, grab a bottle of booze, throw it at the monster, and hope one of your friends lights it on fire. You get to do those pieces in combat too. It's just, you have to wait till your turn.
That's the trick. In the near future, we'll take a deep dive into the player's handbook and go over some of these more detailed rules. But for now, remember, this is about the new and nervous player. This is about introducing folks to the world of Dungeons & Dragons. So keep it simple. And we hope that you will give it a shot, even if you're a little nervous.
Combat always ends, and hopefully it ends with your side victorious. It's not always the case, but you hope that it is. Sometimes it ends with the bad guy running away. Sometimes it ends with you running away. But when it ends with you defeating the monster, you and your party have emerged victorious. Then you celebrate. So lots of groups do it different ways, but the way D20 to Curtain announces that you have felled your foe, our DM, Jerome, will say, bring it down, just like the curtain. And then the player will describe how they brutally murder the space dragon. See you later, space dragon. Happy trails.
It was nice knowing you. We'll look for you in the new Monster Manual in 2021.
I said happy trails, and now I see the space dragon with a cowboy hat on. I made that really weird.
The last part we wanted to talk about is social interaction. In addition to combat and exploration, you are allowed, in fact, you are encouraged to communicate with, to interact with the people in this world. These will be everything from monsters, sometimes it doesn't have to end in combat, to dignitaries and royalty, even the people in your own party. Discussing what your character wants is a wonderful way to explore the intricacies of this game. It's not just about swinging a sword, but sometimes diplomacy is the order of the day.
And also, sometimes your barbarian might just want to yell in somebody's face and try to make them be themselves.
Which is also pretty cool.
Indeed. Social interaction is talking to the king and trying to get his support. Talking to the blacksmith to purchase a new sword. Social interaction takes many forms in this game. It's also, hey, fellow party member, how did you feel about what just happened? All of those things are versions of social interaction in the game of Dungeons & Dragons.
Get to know the people in your party. Remember, you're building a story with not just these players, but with these characters. So explore them, explore your feelings about them and theirs about you. It'll make a more interesting and fun story.
Absolutely. And that's it. Guys, that's it. It's really that simple.
Yep, the game in a whole.
Chat with each other, smash stuff with a shield, and explore.
Yeah,
Ride a horse.
You've heard the basic layout for a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, full disclosure, it'll take a lot longer than this. The game is usually somewhere between 2 and 4 hours. Believe me, that time will fly by. You look up and you're like, oh no, I don't want to stop. Once you're immersed in a world like that, it's hard to leave it. It's tough to go back to bills on the table and having to do the laundry.
Absolutely. You really will be sad when it ends, I promise.
I typically am. Now that we've covered the basic, air quotes, rules of the game, let's talk a little bit about how to entice new and interested players to discover the game and maybe, just as importantly, ways to avoid turning people off from the game.
We reached out to the D20 to Curtain community for a word from the wise and asked, how do you introduce new and nervous players to Dungeons & Dragons? Here's a few thoughts from our friend Chris Honius, a player and dungeon master right here in Oklahoma.
How I do introduce new players and nervous players to Dungeons & Dragons is that I introduce them in little bits and pieces. Okay, there's close to 17 or 18 source books at this point with pages upon pages of rules, classes, subclasses, races, just an infinite number of words that if you throw it all at somebody in one go at first shot, it's going to scare off those nervous players and turn off new ones. So I recommend that instead of throwing the player's handbook at somebody, instead of introducing them to the Sword Coast Adventures Guide or whatever your favorite D&D book is to talk with them and find out what they like. Find out what movies they like to watch. Find out if they play video games. And if they play video games, do they play RPGs? Do they play online MMOs? And if they do, what do they like to main in those? because what they like to main in those and what movies they like to watch and what kind of RPG character they usually put the most effort into learning, it's usually the ones that they like. So you can use that information and the 17 books that you own, as I do, to help them build a character without bombarding them with extra junk. Base, simple rules, action economy, how rolling a d20 works. Hit them with just roll a d20 when I ask you to roll, and then look for the number that corresponds with the word that I gave you to look up. I want an intelligence roll. You roll a d20, and then you find the word intelligence on your character sheet and add that. Very simple. Introduce it bit by bit by bit as you play with them. Warn them. Don't be that DM that goes, yeah, well, you should have known what triggers an opportunity attack. Let them know, hey, you're about to step away from that guy. He's going to get an attack of opportunity against you, which means he gets to try to hit you. Are you still wanting to do that? Just be nice. Don't bombard somebody, and be nice.
Wise words. Wise words from
answer.
our friend Chris Honius.
Absolutely. And he is such a great guy to play with. We got a chance to play with him as a guest player, and I think he'll be on this campaign of D20 to Curtains. But he's so fun. He's so game. And he's so
giving.
kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kindness, that's something that we really value, and is something that Chris values too as a player. And I think that's really excellent.
And it makes such a difference in the experience. It so often, more often than not, we have played with some of the kindest, most generous players. And we're learning that within ourselves, is that the more generous you are, the better the experience.
Absolutely.
A big thank you to our friend Chris Honius for sending in that word from the wise. And to add your voice to the community, check out our Facebook page and website for upcoming questions for future episodes. Take out your phone, record it as a voice recording, and send that MP3 to community@d20decurtain.com. In addition to what Chris is saying, which I think is dead on, we actually have some thoughts about things that you can do to help encourage, introduce, and welcome new players and nervous players to your gaming table experience. So let's jump right in. First on my list, make make-believe. And the people who do it not only accept it, but special. It's important to let people know that it is okay to pretend. It's hard for adults, I think, to let down their guard in front of other adults. You're going to be discussed. You're going to be talked about. You're just certain of it. So make sure that at your table, you encourage them to make believe, to pretend. You applaud that because they'll feel much more free to do it. I'm looking at you, my dear friend, Timothy Stewart, who is always such a giving role player. And always so willing to engage in make-believe. The identity of the Secret Cable will die with me.
I love it. My addition to the list is provide helpful tools. Those new players aren't going to have a player's handbook. They're not going to have a sack full of dice. Oh, I have a sack filled with dice. It clunks on the table. So share those dice, share your player's handbook, share your knowledge, and make sure that they feel as though they're being taken care of when they sit down at your table. Here you go. Here's all the things you need. You need come with nothing to my table but yourself.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent rule.
And then you draw them in.
That's
and
right.
the next thing you know, they're buying Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And
Yeah.
it's a go.
And bringing pizza to the game.
Also, A+ move. A+ move, folks. Bring some pizza.
My next addition, make every new player your welcomed guest. When you have guests at your house, you don't say, hey, we heard you're a vegetarian, but we made hamburgers, eat up. You make the game special for them. Yes, it's going to derail your normal circumstances. You're going to change things a little bit. But make sure you let your players know in advance. Make sure that they know you're welcoming a new player. Because really what you're doing is creating a new convert. They walk away from that experience. They're telling everybody about it. The next thing you know, they're calling you at the end of the day and saying, I want to build a new character. Well, how do I start? I've already got my player's handbook. I bought both 5E and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't even know how they were named before. But they've bought every book. They're going back all the way through the canon, and they're going to build that special player for the next time they're allowed to play. You could be creating the next DM for your session that you get to play in. So make sure that they feel like a welcomed guest and that you've pulled out the red carpet just for them.
Another item on the list is celebrate moments with the new player. Be they big, be they small, succeed, fail. Make a big deal out of all of those things, just like you do with your regular party. You vanquished the bad guy. Heck yeah, you're going to cheer, you're going to applaud, you're going to get super pumped about it. Did they trip and drop their sword? Oh man, that sucks. Sorry about that. Everything should be a joy. Everything should be exciting because it is, because it's a game that is fun. So make certain that the new player sees that that's the attitude you have about it.
If you create an environment where everyone is celebrated, where you remember at the end of the night, hey, DM, thanks, that was a great adventure, where you go up to a player that seemingly in the story screwed everybody over and you says, oh my God, that was an amazing moment, then they realize that there is no chance for failure. You can take a different path. You can be not successful at an action, but as far as playing the game and moving toward that winning condition, everybody is part of the success. And so they walk away going, I can do this. Not only is it not hard, but I want to do it again. That's a real treat for me. And it was one of the first experiences that I had that made me say, I think I want to try this. I'll add my next suggestion to the list. Listen and give it back to them. It's so important to listen to the new player. It's important to listen to everybody at the table, but to listen to them and then to share that you listened back to them inside the confines of the game. They know they are not just there and a burden, a new fixture that you guys are all trying to work around. If they mention their backstory, find some way to have your character introduce that concept back to them. Hey, I was listening to you. I know that what you're saying is an important part of our story, and I want to help draw it in and give it some more life. Now a main character has given this element a level of importance. That goes a long way to helping people feel like they're part of the community you're building at the table.
Absolutely. You're all standing over the table and you're looking at the map and you're planning your next attack. And you all have this vibe. You've been playing together for a long time. So you're pattering back and forth. Everybody's falling into their usual roles and the new person has something to say. Listen to them. Listen to them. In all likelihood, they're going to have an idea that you would have never thought of.
Absolutely. And it works just as well. Even if your character is not the type that will give them the time of day. You, the player, listen to them and then find a way to let that character come back in and acknowledge the fact that he heard them. Oh man, they will feel like they're on cloud nine and they won't be able to wait until the next time they're able to sit down with a group of people like yours.
And that actually leads us into the next thing on the list, which is engage the new player.
Yeah.
Approach the new player. And, I think, Jerome, you just said something that's really true and telling. And it is something you have to think about and balance. Sometimes you get really into your character and your character wouldn't do such a thing. But guess what? You're piloting this character and we're playing a game together and It's a cooperative game. So even if you have a snooty, stuck-up character, you can find a way to engage with the new player. And if they're quiet, make certain that they feel seen. Just toss a comment off, but engage with that new player and it helps settle them in the world. It helps them understand you as a player versus you as a person. Right. All it does is help immerse them deeper.
For sure. We have one of our favorite players is relatively shy as a person. She sits down at our home game and starts to play, and inevitably she's going to say something that is so quick-witted, so clever. You completely could not have guessed that in a million years would come out of her mouth. And when she says it, it breaks our game up and brings such joy to the people at the table. It's a joy to watch. If we hadn't engaged her, we would have missed so much value from this extraordinary player.
All these things happen in the game. We remember them, of course, I guess, but everybody can remember when Amy made the cosplay joke.
Right.
Everybody remembers exactly what she said. That's the kind of player she is.
Big shout out to our friend Amy. Number 7, and this one's a big one on my list. Don't judge them. Don't judge other players. Not only that, don't give the perception that you're judging them. Full disclosure, when I was a kid, I used to walk around in my robe. I'd strap my broom to my back with a piece of string and pretend to be Prince in Purple Rain. One of my favorite movies at the time, still love it. And I did that within the privacy of my own home because no one ever saw me. Imagine my horror and shock if some young girl that I was enamored with had walked in and said, "What a dork, you're such a loser, what are you doing?" It's the same thing here. You're asking them to play pretend in front of a group of adults. In a lot of cases, it's people they don't know. So for the love of God, don't make anything they do wrong. You know, laughing with them is great. Laughing at them will destroy a person's ability to do this thing that is already taboo for some. So make sure they feel like what they're doing is awesome and that you appreciate their vulnerability at your table with you.
And further on the list is model the qualities of a good and generous player for the new player. And that goes with your interactions with the new player. That goes with the interactions with your party and with your DM. You know, keeping your cool, being kind, being a generous role player, listening, reacting, all those things we talked about above are hallmarks of a good and generous player. So modeling those behaviors for a new player is going to go a long way to A, making them see and understand the game, and B, making them want to come back to your table.
Be the table that everybody wants to play at. And part of that comes from modeling the qualities that good players possess.
Absolutely. Share that spotlight.
Number 9, be a source of assistance without robbing the players of their agency. Give the player at the table the opportunity to try and, yes, fail. For some, looking in the book is how they cement information. If you always tell them unasked, then they may not have the opportunity to build the knowledge that you hope they will build. However, it is so encouraging when a player takes interest in you and says, "Hey, if you need anything, I'm right here. I've played for a while and I'm happy to help. I'm not here to take your game from you. I'm here to help you experience the game on a whole new level." That line makes such a difference because sometimes I'm afraid to ask. But if you offer, I feel so much more encouraged. And I feel like, okay, these people are not just waiting for me to leave the table. They're actively helping me build an interest in this thing. And so I'm going to continue giving it a try.
But then, too, to build onto that, we can go back to don't judge the player. Let's say that you're, there to help. They think they want to try something. Don't judge their choice.
Yeah.
If they have an idea that seems a little bit off kilter, it might just turn out to be really cool.
Right. That's an excellent piece of advice.
The last item on our list is patience is a virtue. And I'm going to quote my sweet Grammy. Patience is a virtue with its own reward. Be patient with the new player. The new player doesn't know the rules like you do. The new player has never rolled a d20 before. The new player can't remember what die to roll for damage. Be patient. It's going to take a little bit of time. You may pluck a d8 straight out of the giant bag of dice that you have, but a new or nervous player, they don't know that yet. So be patient and give them the space to learn and learn to love it.
Just like I hope that each one of you takes the time after your session is over to show your appreciation for the players, the dungeon master, make sure you do the same for the new player. It took a lot for them to come. It took a lot for them to stay. It took a lot for them to pipe in. So make sure you say, "Thanks, you brought so much to the game. I can't wait to play with you again. You've got a great character." Whatever it is that encourages them to invest in this community. The thing that I found that I love most about this group of people, the people that I play with, the people at our local gaming store, is they're willing to share their special thing with you. So many times we want to hold on to our special thing and keep it from other people. And here they're just generous with sharing it. And it's such a breath of fresh air. I encourage you to make sure that that's how your table welcomes and brings in new and nervous players. And the great thing about this list is it's not just a list for new players.
That's right. This is also a great way to treat your friends that you've been playing with for years. This is the way you keep all the folks at the table happy and enjoying their game.
And bringing pizza.
Always bring pizza.
That's
Cheese only, man.
I'm good with whatever. So that's our primer episode, D&D 101. We hope that you have gained something from this episode. I know that even as we've been talking, I am reminded of things that I can do better at our game.
Absolutely.
So we hope that you continue to do your best to stay safe and stay sane during these difficult times, not only for yourselves, but for those around you. We can't wait to hang out with you again and to create more adventures and to talk more about Dungeons and Dragons. Until then, have fun, be kind,
Wash your hands.
and play the role.
Dragons in space.